Hi, and welcome to our LinkedIn Live series on the release of the ISM Report on Business. My name is Dan Zeiger. I'm a senior writer and copy editor for Inside Supply Management. That's Institute for Supply Management's member publication. And we're happy you're joining us today. The release of the Manufacturing PMI revealed a reading of 46.8% in July. That's the 20th time in the last 21 months that it's come in below 50 as companies continue to wait for demand. And the Dow Jones is down almost 500 points right before we came on the air here, last I checked, since the release of the data. And Treasury yields have also dipped. So it's been an eventful morning for economic data, and I'm pleased to be joined by someone I always learn a lot from, Timothy R. Fiore. He's the chair of the ISM Manufacturing Business Survey Committee, who will help us break it all down. And I know a lot of people are looking at the calendar today and can't believe it's already August. Especially after a July in which many things could not have changed any more than they did. And that manufacturing expansion, Tim, in March looks even further in the rearview mirror now. Just help me make sense of it. Just, what's
I'm not even
going
counting it anymore, Dan. That 50.1 doesn't count.
Yeah. So what's your takeaway from the data?
Okay, first off, to my Connecticut ISM supply management professionals, note the Moby Dick Award. I love that award. It's my favorite award. I finally got it on the wall. Thank you, Connecticut ISM. Okay. So, here we are. Let me kind of give the quick overview. On the input side actually got better. I can't explain why suppliers are delivering faster, slower. I can't explain why they're delivering slower when there's less and less things to work on. So we'll have to see how that all kind of shakes out. It could be a combination of vacations. It could be that suppliers are ahead of their panelist customers and letting people go faster. That could all be happening. Don't know yet. We'll see. But I was glad to see it get above 50, but it was an odd thing to actually happen in this month. Staying in the 40s would have been more fitting with the rest of the data. The inventory number, still extremely low, manufacturing inventory. I think that's a bit of a carryover from the half close, the quarter close at the end of June. Sometimes we have those issues because it's very hard to measure to the end of the month and rack it up and see what you have compared to what you started with. So sometimes we do have a carryover effect on that. We'll see. But I don't see the real important thing is I don't see the confidence level in the panelist companies to go ahead and expand that inventory level. They're continuing to take inventory out. I've gone back and did a look at what is the average inventory number over a period. And if you look at 20 years of inventory numbers, 48 and some change is the average. And that, in talking to some of the other people who watch this stuff very closely, we've all kind of felt that customer inventory at the 48 level is right. But manufacturing inventory off of 50 is not an unusual thing, but we're way off now. So there's upside to come there, but it's not going to come next month or the month after. It's probably going to come in Q1 of next year. It seems like everybody's getting aligned for Q1 of next year. It seems like everybody's getting resigned to the fact that second half is going to be weaker than the first half. The first half was not a strong half, not for manufacturing. The 2-point-some-odd% GDP in Q2, we'll see how that really gets finally adjusted and scored. But by far the majority of that happened in the service sector. And I did go in and look at what it meant for manufacturing, and I think it was 0.5% was the manufacturing element, goods element. So that kind of fits with where we're at. We're at this kind of level, we're running at a 1.2-1.5 GDP rate. So inputs were fine. I mean, there's some upside on the inventory side, probably not upside on the supply delivery side. The prices number coming in at 52, to me, was like a 50. That's where we were the prior month. That's where we are this month. It shows weak price growth, which is normally what you want in a healthy environment. It's not extensive price growth. It's not dramatic price growth. It's not dramatic price reductions. Now, I think some of what's holding that there is that the steel prices are finally coming down, consistent with steel scrap prices coming down as a result of more used cars ending up in the scrap pile. If you want to track this thing back, and the reason that steel was held up so high from a price standpoint in light of weak demand, it probably goes back to the fact that we didn't have steel scrap, which primarily comes from cars. And during that period when you couldn't get a car, you didn't junk your car. You just kept driving it. So we had a huge drop off in scrap availability, which has now come back into the market, and we now have steel at its historical price of about $650 a short ton. Wow. After all this, we're back to where we were in 2019 with a commodity like steel. Okay. So let's move on now to the demand side. I have 4 elements that I watch for demand. It's new orders, new export orders. It's backlog and customer inventories. Only one of them did okay, and it's probably the weakest one. It's the customer inventory one. So we're either at the high side of too low or the low side of just right. It's not great, but it's a glimmer, and we'll see how it changes next month. But the 3 negative ones, new order levels at 47.4, in spite of a 2-point markup for seasonal factors. It would have been 45. New export orders flat at 49. Sleeping clients overseas, don't expect that to change this year. Their economic outlook is still not very good. Germany continues to come in at low PMIs themselves, as well as China coming in at 49 or something. So can't see any help coming from the international community. Even in the armament side, it's probably not big enough to move the needle. Then we have backlog at 41.7. That's really not the depth. It's our clients are still reporting less. We've had 22 months, I think, of declining backlog. And with this kind of new order rate, it's going to continue to decline. The only way, if the new order rate's going to stay the same, the only way you're going to get backlog to grow is to lay all your people off and furlough your factories. Now, you might start to see comments around furloughs. Highly likely. Probably not in the summertime. Maybe in September, maybe October. October is a pretty good manufacturing month, and September is not bad. But you're probably going to see those announcements. And I think you've been watching the Q2 earnings releases, earnings season. They're in most cases they're revising downward. They're saying they have profit pressure, they got cost pressure, they can't pass price increases on. So we're kind of in that moment. So backlogs aren't going to grow. And then the new order number, that's a level of confidence. Lead times are probably back to normal, although our numbers aren't really showing that. My guess is that lead times are back in the buyer's favor, which means they're not really incentivized much to place orders early. But they want to have an order stream in place too, because they don't want holes in their schedules either. But I don't see anything changing there until we know where the next administration wants to go, and we know where the Fed is going to go. And I think he sent a good signal yesterday, with the fact that he's pretty confident probably September is going to be the first rate drop. They're still talking quarter point. Based on this report, I would like to seen a quarter point yesterday.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see one next month, but they're meeting. And the only way they're doing their annual meeting, the only way you'd see one next month is if they had a special meeting. And I don't think our report warrants that. But I do think that you're going to see the CPI and the PPI and the PCE continue to come in towards that inflation number, the target. But as you saw this morning with initial jobless claims, it came in at almost 250,000 initial jobless claims, up from 227. I haven't seen a 10% growth in that number since the pandemic. Yeah. So finally, the employment numbers are starting to move. Now, they're not really employment numbers for manufacturing. We're a small employer. They're employment numbers for the entire U.S. economy. But when those people don't have a job, they don't spend money. When they don't spend money, they don't buy goods. It's as simple as that. So we're finally starting to see the IJC come up. Wouldn't surprise me if next month when we talk, that number is going to be 300,000. Would not surprise me at all. Based on the comments that we got from our panelists, there's more layoffs coming. Yeah,
that's a good lead into the question you just talked about. Consumer spending and some of the dynamics there, and some of the comments that our respondents, the survey respondents had. Yeah, just going through it, seemed like they were, as pessimistic as I've seen in a while. Not only on consumer spending, but on some of the employment dynamics that you just spoke of. And that there's fear there that those dynamics could lead to a slowing of the economy. Just kind of elaborate on the feedback that you got from the survey respondents.
Yeah, so we could easily have a hard landing in manufacturing and not have a hard landing in the overall economy. We could have that. Anything is possible. just because manufacturing goes into a hard landing doesn't mean the overall economy would go into a hard landing, to kind of set it straight.
Mm-hmm.
We're clearly headed to something probably more than a soft landing at this point.
Mm-hmm.
This is a big warning sign here. And, a couple of reasons why I'm saying that, let me talk broadly. So the first one is my headline sentiment. I've been tracking headline sentiment for, 5 years. And what I do is I look for people who are confident about the future. And at this point, if they're saying that their business is stable for the future, I'm seeing that as positive. On the negative side is people who are declining, where order rates are down, not softening, down. So, and generally we run a positive number because that's just human nature. We've run as high as, I think, 15-1 in this ratio. We're now down to 1 to 1.4. So I have 1.5 people with a not so positive attitude compared to one person who is. That's pretty unusual. I've only had negative numbers here 2 or 3 times in the last 5 years. So that kind of sets the stage. Now, it's not the final word, it's one word. On the hire to fire ratio, again, I look for who's hiring and who's either managing their headcount through freezes, attrition, or layoffs. The three big tools.
Mm-hmm.
We went to a 1 to 1.8. So a lot more people talking about headcount reduction, freezes, more layoffs coming, letting temporary workers go, early retirements. Those are bad signals. I mean, in this point, letting people go, I think, is a bad signal because it means that industry is saying, I don't have a need for these. I work so hard to get them. I don't have a need for these people in the next 3 to 6 months. They got to go because I don't have the financial variable, the financial room to carry them for the 3 to 6 months. That's kind of what's happening here. And I'll pay the severance, we'll write it off, and then we'll move forward. And if business comes back strong in 2025, then we'll look at hiring again because they're not convinced that business is going to come back strong. And nor am I. What is strong? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've got these artificial barriers in place, restrictive financial policy, monetary policy, and we have a really unknown election, high deficits too, but there's just too many unknowns. The third element I want to kind of add in here is that over 87% of manufacturing GDP is contracting. That's a high number. I've only seen I had 93% a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not so much the total that are contracting at 50 or less, because you could have all 18 contracting at 49.9, and that's not a bad day. But if they're contracting at 46.1, that's a bad day. So I look at 45 and less, and just to kind of lay it out, February, 1% contracting at 45 or less. March, 1%. April, 4%, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
May, 2%, no big deal. June, 14%, alarm.
Mm-hmm.
July, 34%.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. That includes transportation equipment, food and beverage, mechanical products, fabricated metal products. The only 2 of the big 6 that aren't in severe contraction is chemicals and computer and electronics. They're both contracting, but they're at the 49s.
Mm-hmm.
So, and chemicals we've been watching as a bellwether. So it went from being a bellwether in the growth cycle to now doing a reverse and coming back down. So that to me kind of says is we're in this dead zone here, and we're going to stay in it until the election's over. Because even with rate cuts, it's going to be they're not going to be big cuts, probably going to be quarter point. In the big scheme of things, it doesn't really change anything. It just confirms that we're on a rate cut trajectory. I don't know at this point whether that's going to allow people to have more confidence to make a lot more commitments. I think at this point, you're also going to have to clear up the administration who's going to be in control of the United States for the next 4 years.
Yeah.
Add some clarity on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about that. I was one of the things specifically I wanted to ask you, because I know you've been asked about it, for the last couple of months at least. The election matters. I mean, I think there's a perception that things just truck along and big business just goes along just fine. But there are some significant issues here that are at stake and that are going to impact how companies move forward. And one of the things that I know that you've been specifically asked on is, energy policy. So, just talk about the impact of the election and the uncertainty, surrounding that and how it's impacting the data.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent for inexpensive energy because that's what's made the U.S. great, probably from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And to lose that advantage when technologically we figured out a way to reharvest all of our hydrocarbons, and we are doing it, and we can do more. I think that's really good. We got natural gas down to $2.1 per 1,000 cubic feet of gas, BTUs, not cubic feet, BTUs, which we've been at 1.5, 1.6. Europe's at probably 8. China, Asia's probably at 10, 8 to 10. LNG moving around the world is helping that. It's helping bringing those gaps closer together. But we still clearly have advantage natural gas. And if we're allowed to export more, then you can see that helping our new export orders for sure, and our business volumes. So I think the election piece is more around which industry is going to be impacted by the policies that either are going to put in place. I mean, you can see that the Democrats want to really support the green energy, which is mechanical parts, composites, it's wind turbines, it's gearboxes, it's solar panels, which we haven't figured out how to get that polycarbonate out of China or make it here. For some reason, China makes all the silicon carbonate, whatever it is, polysilicon in the world, and we don't have the capability to make it here. So, whatever happens there is going to definitely benefit China. And it's a much slower thing. I think you see it happening now with the grids. People are being a lot more realistic about how long it's going to take to get those grids up to speed so that they can carry the capacity. Right now, obviously they can't, and California is kind of the proving ground of that. So, I think it's 2025. People are already saying 2025 is going to be better than 2024. Remember, we went into 24 thinking it would be better than 23.
Yeah.
And I think the fact that the Fed has had this war on inflation, and they've held to their guns than most. And I think now what manufacturing is saying is you got to give us some relief. There's no way that they would have known that before this. They'd have to be clairvoyant and risk, loving to take risk on, and that's not what the Federal Reserve does. They want to make steps when there's low risk of a reversal. So they're waiting. But like I said, if there was an August meeting, I would expect that the rates would be cut. Will that help? Yes. Will it solve the problem? Not sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, thanks a lot. And just a little plug on that, there'll be an article in our September issue of Inside Supply Management about the election and what it might have, ramifications for supply chains. So be on the lookout for that. Going back to the demand element of it, you talked about the customer's inventories index. And I know, we get a lot of questions on how that index works exactly and what it measures. And you had mentioned that, it's kind of teetering between about right and too low territory, and the impact that has on demand. Do you see that we're kind of reaching a something has to give point on that when you look at the amount of product on shelves versus the new orders and the output numbers there? Let's talk about that dynamic.
Yeah, so there's a number of inventory buckets that we have visibility on, quite a few, but not all of them. The first one we don't have visibility on is the amount of inventory that our suppliers are holding for us. There's no measurement here in the PMI that indicates that. So suppliers could be stuffed full with inventory, which would be a good thing for a buyer because you got reduced lead times and you could probably negotiate some price changes for that. But we don't have visibility into it. Okay, so it could be happening. Something tells me it probably isn't. I think we've had enough time of 2 years here, really, of a declining environment. I think most people have cleared out inventory. You get into this environment now where you don't have a lot of new work. If you're an individual owner of a business, you might go ahead and build inventory. If you have high confidence that inventory will be converted, you can sell it. If it's not a consumption kind of thing that's based on consumer desires, you probably aren't going to build much. But if you got customers who have a product that's early age of its life cycle, right now they're saying, no, I don't want the 10 that I told you a couple of months ago, you might go ahead and build the 10 and hold on to it. Okay, but we don't have visibility to that. The second one is manufacturing inventory, which would also include semi-finished goods, as well as work in process, as well as finished goods. That's what's in our inventory number. So that's the amount of inventory that our panelist companies are holding. And we ask them, do you have more, less, or the same this month? So they've been saying now for 20 some odd months, I think it's 20, right? 18 months that they have less. They don't tell us how much less, just that they have less. So every month they've been cutting into that inventory, taking it down. Because remember, 23 was a liquidity year. You want to take that inventory, you want to monetize it, and you don't want to replace it. That's how you generate cash. You sell that inventory and you don't buy more of it. The third one is customer inventory. That is a measurement of how much inventory of ours that our customers have in their factories. Mm-hmm. So it's a difficult one for our panelists to respond to, but they do it pretty well. They have a feeling for how much of the stuff they've shipped is still sitting in inventory in their customers' plants. And the way they know this is from under lead time orders coming from their customers. Mm-hmm. So if there's a lack of under lead time orders, then that would indicate that they have enough inventory on hand to satisfy their needs. If there's a whole huge amount of under lead time orders, that would indicate that there isn't enough inventory at the customer's plant, and therefore they're relying on us. So it tends to seesaw a bit, but as long as we're in the about right to lower, that means that our panelists are thinking that my customers need more of my goods next month, which is a positive for next month's production activity. So in this case, of the 4 demand elements that we look at, this is the only one that our panelists have said is positive. And it's positive from the standpoint is they're saying that they think that their customers are going to need more of their product in next month. Now, that's a good thing, because if this number had come in at 52 or 53, you'd have low orders, you'd have low backlog, you'd have low output, and you'd have our panelists saying that our customers have way too much of our product. Those are the negative. We're not quite there. We have negative. The only one we're missing here is the customer inventory number, and I'm happy for that. Hopefully it stays there as we go through the rest of the year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You talked about prices a little bit, particularly for certain metals, and I think just gives us a chance. I think, sometimes I like to, talk to you about, or ask you about how the mechanics of certain indexes and how they work. And, let's talk about the price indexes a little bit. I mean, you talked about how, it's technically in expanding or increasing territory, but it's certainly not as dramatic as we've seen in the past. And one of the mechanics questions that, I hear a lot is that you hear in business, news and reporting that, one of the biggest costs, for businesses is labor. And some people wonder, well, does that factor into the prices index for the report on business, or is it just commodities? Could you just talk about what the index measures and, just basically how that works?
Yeah. So our index measures input cost, purchased input cost. It does not measure labor cost. Mm-hmm. That's a whole different animal. That's outside of our purveyorship. And complicated to measure on a month-to-month basis. So what the supply management people do is they look at their bread basket of stuff that they buy, and once a month they make a determination as to whether that bread basket is up in price, same in price, or down in price compared to the prior month. And that's what you see from them. It's a very pure measurement. It's very helpful and beneficial to me. It's not a conglomerate or an aggregate or a composite of labor and material, which to me doesn't mean a lot as I try to dissect the dynamics between buyer and seller. If my price index had labor costs for my company in there, I wouldn't be able to do that. So there's a competitor out there that their prices number includes their, the panelist company's labor costs. I'm not sure really what the benefit of that is. They would have been better off splitting them, if you ask me. But I like our pure number because it really shows the dynamics between buyer and seller. and who has the advantage, who doesn't, when you hit equilibrium. There's no clouding of the facts by having labor costs in there. And frankly, labor costs don't change dramatically. They generally change over an annual period. You have merit budgets, you hire people within bandings. They don't change month to month like material costs do. I mean, the reason our prices index was so subdued in the month is that steel has come down. I'm not sure if I mentioned this already, probably because scrap prices have finally come down. Yeah. The other thing is that plastics have gone up, and that seems to be driven by the storms that we had in Texas in early July, and the fact that a lot of stuff got shut in, and we probably had transportation routes that were disrupted. So you had raw plastic prices grow in the month of July, probably will grow again in August, even though our natural gas price has been dropping, which is the feedstock for it. So that's really what's behind the number in July. The prices number is that it's really steel prices coming down because of scrap. We also have aluminum on the rise again, unfortunately, and I think there's a pretty significant tariff on that. And we have the plastic resins that are up in price for the month, mainly across the board.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we got a couple of minutes left. I mean, there was just so much to talk about this month. I didn't, couldn't be hard pressed to fit it all in 30 minutes. So I'll just, make my last question, anything that you feel is important to add. I know there were a couple of comments from respondents about geopolitical concerns, if you want to address that, or anything that you think might be important before we get off the air here in regards to, what people need to know this month.
So I think we're in a new environment here, and it's not generally a bad environment, but I think it's going to stick with us through the majority of the rest of the year, which is unfortunate. I like cyclicity in the index. Everybody likes cyclicity. That's what makes the PMI a great number, because it's highly cyclic, which means that the gap between the highs and the lows is definable. It's not small. The service side tends to be a lot more constant. The manufacturing side is a lot more cyclic, and I think that goes along with our role. Like I said, you could have a major decline in manufacturing, but not a major decline in the economy, and vice versa. You could have a major growth in manufacturing without a major climate in the economy. So, I think we're into a new environment here. The feelings are pretty much across the board. They start to develop back in the April-May timeframe. We went from a high degree of optimism in December to more skepticism by the time we hit March, April. By the time we hit May, our 2.0 forecast update indicated that the second half of the year would be weaker than the first. So last 6 months have brought a transition from, hey, it's going to be a good year, to it's going to be a lot more like 2023. So that's kind of where we're at. I mean, the sentiment numbers are negative, strongest negative I've seen since I've been tracking it. The higher fire ratio is negative, strongest numbers I've seen since I've been tracking it. I think these are all good things. It means that manufacturing is responding quickly to a lack of work, because that's exactly what it is. It's a lack of work. We overextended the supply chain. We built up the backlog. It took us 2 years to get that backlog down. And now that we're looking at significant layoff activity and force reduction activity, it's purely due to a lack of work and a lack of clarity on the horizon as to when that work will come back. The 34% manufacturing contracting at 45 or less is an alarming number. That number gets to 50, it's going to be really alarming. But I don't see why it won't get to 50 in the next couple of months. So, because companies, they don't lay off usually in anticipation. They're usually well into a cycle when they go ahead and do their layoff. A freeze is different. I don't feel good about the future, stop all hiring. Or I don't feel good about the future, if somebody quits, don't replace them. Those are easy to do. Layoffs are not easy to do. There are reserves involved. There's Warren Acts. There's a lot of emotional issues around it. You have to look at multiple structures, not only floor level people, but you got the management chain, you got the indirect management chain. You try to maintain that G&A to ops ratio of employees. You don't lay off the factory workers and get your office people all sitting there kind of waiting for the next growth profile. That's not how it works. So we're into a rough road here. I don't think we're into a really bad road. I don't think we're into a recession period, but I think we're definitely into a rough road, and that manufacturers are going to be doing a lot of restructuring here because we don't have an order book. We don't have new orders coming in. And until that PMI number hits the mid 50s, 54, 55, 56, we're going to be stuck in this. And I mean 54, 56 without any kind of seasonal help.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good point. On the new environment for manufacturing, I've been thinking about that as well. And I'm sure that's something that we will be talking about in the coming months, not only just for this broadcast, but also I'll probably want to talk to you about it too for the magazine. So yeah, it'll be a interesting month of August. And yeah, I can't wait to talk to Tim about what the data for August will reveal in a month's time. But thanks
August
for joining.
Is a slow month.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of vacations, a lot of shutdowns. It should show up in our seasonal factors.
Oh, Tim, I think you put yourself on mute accidentally.
I did.
Yeah.
I hit it by mistake. The only seasonal factor well, there was 3 other seasonal factors that were less than 1 point adjustment. I mean, it's not worth talking about. The new order one was a plus 2.7 because you got buyers and stuff that are on vacation in the period. So we step it up to get it back to that normal level. And even then we came down to 47. So I don't see this ending soon.
Yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to watch. Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us today. And for more information, feel free to go to ismworld.org. We're in a little bit. You can read our roundup article that details a lot of what Tim and I have discussed here, as well as the reaction of the markets. Join us on Monday when we discuss the services PMI, which will be very interesting, I'm sure, with Steve Miller, who is the chair of the ISM Services Business Survey Committee. And if you'd like to be a part of the manufacturing services or hospital business survey committees that help compile data for the report on business, you can visit ismworld.org/join the panel for more information. So for Tim Fiore, thanks for your insights. Always good. And for some good folks who helped us behind the scenes, Christina Cahill and Jennifer Stevens, my name is Dan Zeiger, and we'll see you next time.